Should you use Benjamin Moore's Cloud White or Simply White for your next paint project? What used to be a pretty straightforward answer has now become a little bit complicated due to some changes that the colors have gone through. I'm going to fill you in on some similarities and differences between these two mega popular white paint colors and help you solidify your decision as to which one is best suited for your project. If that sounds good, then do a good thing for me and the team by hitting that wonderful little like button, and let's get started. Whether you're painting the inside or the outside of your home, white paint colors are pretty integral parts of any color palette for a variety of reasons. They can act as a literal clean slate when used on walls. They can give you a nice bright pop of light contrast when used on woodwork that can help outline and accentuate architectural features of your home. And they're also naturally really light colors that reflect a lot of light, which could be advantageous. But if you clicked on this video, you're probably aware that it's kind of hard to pick the perfect white paint color. And that's why you have companies like Benjamin Moore that have entire color collections dedicated to whites and off-whites. Cloud White and Simply White, to me, are two of the most popular warm whites that Benjamin Moore sells. And that's the first similarity that I wanted to mention. On the color temperature spectrum, both of them do lean towards the warm side of white, which in my opinion is the more popular side, I guess, for a lot of contemporary color palettes. I'll often hear my clients tell me, James, I don't want my doors to look blue, which is kind of what cool whites can do, but you don't have that issue with either of these two paint colors, so that's a good thing. The first difference between them is the kind of warmth that they both have. Not all whites are created equal, and the same is true for warm whites, because Simply White has more of a simplified, creamy yellow undertone that ends up being pretty subtle, especially when you use it on just your baseboards, for example. But you can start to subconsciously feel or consciously see that little bit of yellow a bit easier on larger surfaces, depending on your eye and the surrounding furniture and flooring near those painted walls. On the plus side, because Simply White just has a bit of yellow within it, it really feels clean, light, and bright. But the yellow alone doesn't really have anything to hide behind, so there have been some complaints about it showing up as almost a neon green undertone in certain circumstances, but your mileage may vary. Cloud White, on the other hand, does something to address this in a way, because to me, it has an added level of complexity that softens that warmth to the point where you're not getting yellow as much as you're getting beige or a combination of cream and a very, very light brown gray. So there's a noticeable difference there. The fact that they're both warm, but warm in different ways. The next similarity is they both are really light paint colors, being versions of white. Although that leads into the second difference, which is that Simply White is the lighter of the two. That's the trade-off you get, because even though Cloud White has those extra components in it, being that beige and the gray, this also adds to its depth, which is represented by a slightly darker coloration. There is about a 4.5 point difference between the two, which doesn't seem like a lot, but within the white paint color category, it's noticeable, especially when they're side by side like this. But from my experience, I never felt like Cloud White was too dark in basically any situation. If anything, there are certain situations where maybe it felt a bit too creamy, especially when paired with much cooler wall colors. But the same might be true with Simply White in those situations as well. In fact, on the subject matter of lightness or brightness, it seems like Simply White has actually darkened a little bit as of late, because its LRV used to be listed at nearly 92 out of 100, but now it's set to be around 89.5. So it's not necessarily the mega bright white that it was before, or at least I don't really think of it in that light. So just a quick recap. Cloud White is slightly darker than Simply White. It also relies on a gray beige warmth rather than a more straightforward yellow warmth found in Simply White. Both paint colors are light enough to feel like a white in practical use, but neither feels stark and lifeless. Let's make some decisions on these colors, because I think that's why you came to this video, to see where I would definitively use each one. Because truthfully, I am a fan of both, and I would maybe lean towards one over the other in different situations. Starting with exterior use, if you were deciding between one of these two to use on the outside of your home, personally, I would almost always go with cloud white. I mean, where do you find clouds, after all? When you're painting the outside of your home, you're dealing with the biggest and brightest light source you can possibly have. And the sun will not only brighten all colors considerably, but it can also cool them down a little bit with a bluish color cast, especially in the early afternoon. This means the brighter Simply White will be exponentially brighter, and it may feel too vibrant for what you're doing. And also that pale yellow could really show more of that green coloration, especially if you have a lot of surrounding greenery bouncing that color onto your house. It happens. Cloud white is just a more sound choice in my opinion overall, because not only is it a bit softer and kind of rounded, it almost feels a little more stable and neutral with that almost taupey quality it has, combining gray and beige and a very, very light brown, I guess you could say. As we move inside the house, it gets a bit trickier, but I feel pretty confident with my decisions. As a trim color, Simply White will feel a little more clean and modern in a lot of cases because it's more simplistic in how it's composed. I mean, that's how it got its name, right? It's simply white and yellow. You could say it can feel a little more traditional, and that's not to say it does not belong in any contemporary color palettes, because it can, but my gut tells me that if you were thinking of one of these colors as your trim and baseboard color, I could see Simply White being the more natural choice for more people. As a wall color or even as a kitchen cabinet color, this is where it gets tricky for me because we're now working with larger surface areas, so the colors are going to be more prominently on display. There's also the important practical element because as a painter, I know that lighter and brighter colors are more tricky to cover with. So while technically cloud white would be the easier one to use, it's not really by a large margin, to be honest. If your goal is to have walls that look close to a pure white, then Simply White would be your choice in this respect. As much as I feel like cloud white would suit a more cozy, rustic, warm color scheme, I think Simply White just feels like the color that's closest to white, which I'm sure a lot of you are looking for. My best advice though would be to test each of these colors separately and independently from one another so you can really solidify your choice, because you do not want to make a costly mistake. And before you decide on one of these two, you should probably watch my comparison on these two white paint colors, because they may be even better choices for you, not to confuse you too much.